Vamos a reiniciar la transmisión y ya está con nosotros el profesor José Arturo Garza-Reyes, una persona, pues sobre todo, muy profesional, buen ser humano y que a nosotros nos da pues mucho orgullo tenerlo el día de hoy en el Congreso Internacional de Logística y Cadenas de Suministro. ¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo estás, José?
Hola Gastón, muchas gracias por la invitación y muy contento de poder estar contigo y apoyando a la conferencia SILOC 2021.
No, pues muchísimas gracias. Muchas gracias, José. Pues sabemos que tienes una agenda muy apretada, has estado recientemente por diferentes partes del mundo, digamos ahora también con la parte digital que lo facilita, pero hemos seguido tu trayectoria y sin duda pues es impresionante. Yo quiero comentarle a quienes nos están siguiendo que el doctor José Arturo Garza-Reyes, pues tuve el gusto de conocerlo hace algunos años allá en Aguascalientes. En aquel momento estuvo con la planilla mayor de la logística y cadena de suministro de Reino Unido, recuerdo, por ahí gente de la Universidad de Cranfield y de otras instituciones importantes como la universidad en la que él está colaborando. Y bueno, a partir de ahí he tenido el gusto de seguir su trayectoria. Sin duda publica con bastante frecuencia en los mejores journals. Pues es mexicano, también nos da mucho orgullo que veamos a una persona como él destacando a nivel global. Incluso con respecto al SILOC, él nos está apoyando con la posibilidad para que los investigadores que han enviado artículos al SILOC puedan luego enviar sus documentos a la revista que él está liderando, ¿no? Por ahí ustedes tienen la información en el sitio del SILOC. Y bueno, sin más preámbulo, para no tomar, digamos, tiempo de tu conferencia, José, voy a leer tu currículum, si me lo permites, tu semblanza, para que la gente que nos está viendo y nos está escuchando, pues tenga un contexto de quién es José Arturo Garza-Reyes. Bueno, él es profesor y director del Centre for Supply Chain Improvement de la Universidad de Derby en Reino Unido. Ha participado activamente en proyectos con empresas globales en donde ha combinado su conocimiento y experiencia industrial para ayudar a las organizaciones a alcanzar la excelencia en sus cadenas de suministro. Como académico, ha dirigido y gestionado proyectos de investigación internacionales financiados por la Comisión Europea, la Academia Británica, el British Council y el Consejo Nacional de Ciencia y Tecnología de México. Cuenta con numerosas publicaciones en revistas científicas líderes y 6 libros en las áreas de innovación y gestión de operaciones, medición del desempeño en la manufactura, mejora continua y sistemas de gestión de calidad. Es cofundador y actual editor del International Journal of Supply Chain and Operations Resilience, que lo edita Inter Science. Él es editor asociado del International Journal of Supply Chain and Operations Resilience. Okay. Y también es editor asociado del International Journal of Production and Operations Management. Editor asociado del Journal of Manufacturing Technology Management y es editor en jefe del International Journal of Industrial Engineering and Operations Management. Como editor invitado, ha liderado ediciones especiales en Supply Chain Management and International Journal, también en otros journals como el International Journal of Lean Six Sigma, el International Journal of Lean Enterprise Research, el International Journal of Engineering Management and Economics, y también en el International Journal of Engineering and Technology Innovation. Bueno, pues sin duda una trayectoria muy impresionante y pues te agradecemos nuevamente, José, por tener la amabilidad de compartir pues tu conferencia con los participantes del Congreso del SILOC. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Gastón. Me voy a permitir subir mis slides. Por ahí me imagino que ya las pueden ver.
Así es, ya podemos ver ahí la presentación.
Ok, estoy haciendo unos ajustes aquí al Zoom. También voy a empezar con el timer. Voy a estar checando mi tiempo porque de otra forma me puedo exceder bastante, hablo bastante. Pero bueno, muchísimas gracias, Gastón, por la introducción. Si me lo permiten y con todo respeto, voy a cambiar del idioma español al idioma inglés. Y la razón por eso es que cuando Gastón me invitó a dar la conferencia, estaba debatiendo entre si hablo en español o en inglés y estaba reflexionando y recordando que de hecho la última vez en que tuve la oportunidad de dar una conferencia en español fue cerca de 20 años atrás. Entonces no me siento mucho con confianza de darlo en español y si me lo permiten voy a moverme al idioma inglés. Es una conferencia internacional, me imagino que no tendrán ningún problema con eso. Entonces, nuevamente les pido disculpas por cualquier inconveniente que pueda causar. Thank you very much again to Gaston and to the organizing committee of Ceylon for inviting me to this conference. I mean, it's a pleasure and an honor for me to be with all of you. I have the opportunity of doing keynote speeches, lectures, seminars, workshops all around the world. And actually last week, I contributed as keynote speaker in two conferences, one in Indonesia and one in India. And over the summer, I have been doing probably over 15. But it's always an honor, and I'm very, very happy to be able to contribute with colleagues and friends like Gaston from my own country, Mexico. So doing like this is very, very special for me. I mean, having the opportunity of talking to you. As Gaston was mentioning, so my name is José Arturo Garza-Reyes, Professor of Operation Management, Head of the Center for Supply Chain Improvement in the University of Derby in the United Kingdom. So what you can see in that slide is actually our main campus in the center. And then we got a campus in Buxton, which is a city about 50 minutes drive from Derby, and our enterprise center in the left-hand side. I mean, don't be dismissed by the sky that you can see in there, very, very blue. That is not very common here in the United Kingdom, but well, the picture looks nice, I would say. Before starting with my presentation, I would just like to give a bit of introduction to my institution, because that will help me to put into context the topic that I'm going to be sharing with you today. So the University of Derby and my city, Derby, is located in the East Midlands in the United Kingdom. You can see it there in the map. Actually, the University of Derby is a post-92 university, which means that we were recognized as a university in 1992. So we are a very, very young university, and by no means we can compare ourselves versus those highly recognized universities around the world. I mean, like Cambridge and the Oxfords and the Cranfield, the Warwicks. So we are a very, very young institution, but despite that, we are doing very well. So right now we are a top 30 university in the United Kingdom out of 120 something universities. And a couple of weeks ago, we received the good news that we have just escalated the world rankings. So before we were a top 1,000 university, now we are in the range of being a top 600 and 800 university. And that is because the research intensity in our institution over the last 10 years has massively, massively increased. And that is helping us to escalate the ranks in the university world ranking. Derby in particular, and this region of East Midlands is a very industrialized region in the United Kingdom. I mean, we got in here the headquarters of what I call the Mighty Royce, the big jet engine manufacturer that supplies jet turbines to Boeing, to Airbus. We also got the headquarters of JCB as well here in Derbyshire, the digger manufacturer, heavy equipment manufacturing, Bombardier, Toyota, Lubrizol. So we've got a very, very strong base, industrial base here in Derby and our region. And as you can imagine, there are plenty of tier 1, tier 2, tier suppliers to these companies. And we're also surrounded by the big, well-known universities like Nottingham is not that far from here, Loughborough University, Leicester University, the Montfort University. So again, it's a very, very lively region in the United Kingdom. And in particular, the research that we are doing in the University of Derby has been focusing on a very particular topic over the last 10 years, and that is environmental sustainability. So a lot of our departments from engineering, natural science, business, and many others have been focusing on environmental sustainability. And actually, the topic that I'm going to be sharing with you is about this big challenge that we are suffering as a society, as a humankind. This is just an example of a project that I have the opportunity of being the director of. It's a £4 million project funded by the European Union. And basically what we are doing with that project is helping companies in what we call here the D2N2 area, which stands for Derby, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire area, to actually reduce CO2 emissions when manufacturing the products, when providing the service, when designing new processes and services. And this is just a little example, again, of the work that the university is doing and the importance that the university is paying to this issue of environmental sustainability. And actually, my talk is going to be related to that. So I'm going to be discussing and showing you how supply chain management has been evolving to actually address this big challenge that we have of environmental sustainability. So I will see it more from the supply chain management, logistic management point of view, and again, giving you a quick overview about what has been done to address this challenge. I will be presenting you a little bit of the research that me and my team have been doing. But I can tell you that I will be flying through some of the slides if I want to meet the 45 more or less minutes mark that I got for the topics. So first of all, I mean, as a humanity, we are facing a huge challenges. And actually, the United Nations is telling, well, it's not only one challenge, but several that we need to address as a humanity. I mean, the food and water conservation is one, diseases and human suffering. I mean, alleviating this is another big challenge. Education, I mean, educating the world population is another big challenge. The massive population growth that we got, the economic aspect, the energy is another big one. I don't know if you have been following the news, but here in Europe, we got a crisis with the gas, and particularly in the United Kingdom with petrol at the moment. So looking for renewable sources of energy, according to the United Nations, is another of the big challenges that we are facing. But out of those challenges, the one that I consider the most important is this one, the environmental challenge. I mean, global warming and CO2 emissions, environmental degradation, pollution, the restoration of habitat, protecting biodiversity, etc., etc. And why do I consider this as the main challenge? Well, basically because it's affecting our home, Earth. So, and if we destroy our home, we will not have a place where to live, and all the other challenges will be completely irrelevant. A lot of research has been dedicated to COVID over the last, year and a half, 2 years with this pandemic that we got. But I mean, I believe that that is something that we will be getting over in the next 6 months, in the next 12 months, in the next couple of years. Actually, the chief scientist of AstraZeneca, who lives here in England, I mean, the person that developed the AstraZeneca vaccine was saying that probably by spring, COVID would now be a kind of normal flu, and that we will not need to worry too much about it because we will develop a natural immunity. So, I mean, it's another big issue, but it's not as big as the environmental challenge. And this is the one in which I'm going to be focusing in my presentation. So we got this challenge, but how big is the environmental sustainability challenge that we have? I mean, I'm presenting some data in here, which by no means is new. I mean, 2005 is quite outdated, I would say, but it doesn't really matter because the trend is exactly the same. I mean, what you can see in that graph is the fact that we, as a society, as a humankind, in theory, we have been increasing our standard of living because our GDP has been increasing. But you can see a contrast between GDP and natural resources depletion. So they are opposite. While one is growing, the other is depleting. And why is this? Because we have not been able to actually find that balance, that sustainability aspect that we should find if we want to carry on living as a humankind in the future. This is another slide that shows some of the trend as well that we have had as the societies, the worldwide society. I mean, particularly CO2 emissions. So you can see that from the year 1900s, so it has massively been increasing, and actually the trend is continuing to be like that. Here in the United Kingdom, we had been able to actually decrease the CO2 emissions for about 3 years, and a year and a half ago, it started increasing again, unfortunately, despite all the efforts of the government and different institutions. So it's a trend that we are having. So we got a problem, big challenge, environmental sustainability. So the problem is huge, is very, very big, and that's something that I will be emphasizing through the presentation. So what have been the consequences of this environmental challenge that we have been facing? I mean, global warming, the increasing in the level of the ocean's water, loss of biodiversity, water pollution, and obviously all that have had some negative impact on our health and an economic impact as well. I had the opportunity of being in Mexico City about 3 years ago, if I remember well. So I'm currently got a project funded by the British Academy, led in Mexico for Dr. Rocha Luis Lorna from the National Polytechnic Institute of Mexico. And I was doing a keynote speech, and another of the presenters, it was actually one of the Mexican representatives of the government in environmental matters in the United Nations. And this lady was literally coming from the airport to do her presentation. And in her presentation, she was saying that based on all the analysis and modeling that scientists in the United Nations were doing, they were predicting that, for example, the raising of the level of ocean waters will become critical, not in 100 years, not in 50 years, but actually by 2030. And I could see the face of all the students, academics, and people from industry in that presentation in the Polytechnic in Mexico City. So quite scary. So the problem is very, very, very big. And you can see it in the news, I mean, everywhere and pretty much every season. I mean, I got, my sister lives in Austin, and in the last winter they had the worst winter ever with very low temperature, something that is not natural in that part of the world. In Australia, the big fires as well. In the United Kingdom, also getting to certain days in which we got very, very high temperatures, which we didn't have before. So these have been some of the consequences of this problem, how critical it is. I mean, this is coming from the Pope Francis addressing the United Nations in 2015. And I think that that quote, it tells you everything. So environmental degradation threatens the very existence of the human species. I mean, I would believe that not many people will debate that, unless you are like, I don't know, this stupid guy, Donald Trump, you know, do not believe in that this is happening. Most of us, thankfully, will agree that that is the case. So this issue is threatening our very, very existence. I don't know if you know this person, Sir David Attenborough. He's a naturalist, worldwide personality, got a lot of different programs, and he has campaigned massively. He's a British person, worldwide about environmental sustainability. He was addressing the United Nations in 2018 and saying something similar to what Pope Francis was saying. Climate change is the greatest threat to humanity in thousands of years. I mean, it's just to emphasize the fact that we are living in borrowed time if we don't do something to address this massive challenge. And that's the next question. Well, have we actually addressed this problem as a society? Well, I would say, and this is just my personal opinion, that we have tried to do something. By no means I am saying that that is enough, but something has been done. That's why different concepts have been developed. I mean, we got the sustainability concept developed in the 1980s, corporate social responsibility, and then we got some other concepts that probably you are familiar with. Green economy, low carbon economy. Now we are moving to what is called the zero carbon economy, or decarbonized economy, if you like. The circular economy, that's another big concept that I'm going to be mentioned later on in the presentation. And well, governments also around the world have been setting different targets to address this massive, massive challenge that we got. I mean, the Chinese government, for example, has been setting its environmental policy based on circular economy principles. Europe as well got different type of target to reduce CO2 emissions by the years 2030, 2050, etc., etc. So in general, I can say that we have done something, which by no means is enough to address this problem. But the point where I want to focus is what supply chains have done in order to try to address this issue. Why we, supply chain manager, logistic manager, have done to actually contribute in our professions, in our job, in the way in which we manage supply chains and logistic operations to address this massive problem. And that will actually show that we have made supply chains evolving and moving from some approaches to other approaches to address this critical issue. And I will give you some examples of those. I mean, one example is that the supply chains have moved from the traditional quality management systems into what is called environmental management system. Nothing new in there. I mean, the quality management system come from the 1970s, 1980s, but we, operation managers, supply chain managers, logistic managers, realize that actually creating all these standards help companies to improve quality. And we say, okay, let's do exactly the same, creating these standards, both in terms of environmental elements to help companies to be more environmental friendly. So in there, again, you can see an evolution in the way in which we have managed our supply chain. So this, from my point of view, would be one of the examples in which we have contributed to address the problem that we have. We have also moved from the traditional TQM or total quality management into what is called TQEM or total quality environmental management, and very similar to the quality standards. So we saw that TQM in many cases helped companies to improve quality. So what we did, it was basically to inject the environmental element to also be considered when improving companies' performance, not only looking at the quality element, but also to the environmental one. And therefore, TQM evolved into TQEM. And I mean, this is a very little research that I did with one of my master students from Warwick a few years ago. So we tried to investigate the degree of adoption of total quality management in the companies, manufacturing companies in China. So we made a small survey of about 119 companies to try again to explore a little bit more whether companies are using this concept of TQEM to improve its environmental quality. I'm not going to go in detail into every single one of these little papers because that could be a full keynote speech. So I'm just scratching the surface. If some of you at some point find it interesting, I mean, you can just Google my name and you will find my contact detail. And by all means, I would be more than happy to have a chat with you or even better, collaborate doing some research. So for this particular research, we actually found that the TQEM is not as popular as some other green approaches using supply chains in logistic operations, such as green supply chains or reverse logistics, or some other quality standard or business excellence approaches, such as Six Sigma, Lean Six Sigma. So companies use it in China, but it is not as popular as all those approaches that I've been mentioning. So we also look at the drivers that motivated companies to use it, the results that they obtain from its implementation, and the challenges that they face to actually implement TQEM. Another of the evolutions that have occurred in supply chains in order to address this problem of environmental sustainability is that we have moved from the traditional production systems into what nowadays it is called cleaner production. And I think that this is a word that has been gaining lately a lot of recognition. And cleaner production was a concept not new, I would say, also proposed in the 1980s. But nowadays, for some reason, a lot of people, especially in South America, based on my experience doing research in cleaner production, it basically tells us that when we design products or run our production process, we need to be looking at conserving energy, we need to design taking into consideration the environment, we need to reduce the natural resources as well, etc., etc. And it is saying, well, apart from being environmentally friendly, if you manage supply chains and operations in this way, yes, you will be more environmentally friendly, but at the same time, you will be more efficient as well. So it's a win-win situation that tries to, at least in theory, get that balance between the economic aspect of sustainability and the environmental one. This is a little bit of the work that me and my team have been doing in terms of cleaner production. I mean, for example, the top paper that you see in there. So we look at creating benchmarking methods based on lean principles. I mean, I suppose that you have heard about lean manufacturing or manufacturers delta. And we have combined it with cleaner production approaches to actually create a method to benchmark sustainability. And we were able to actually test our method in some manufacturing companies in Brazil. The same we did in the other paper, both of them published in the Journal of Cleaner Production, which is a top journal, but looking at Industry 4.0 enablers for cleaner production. So we want to implement these cleaner production principles. So can Industry 4.0 technology, you know, like blockchain and like big data analytics, 3D printing, robotics, simulation, etc., can they help us to actually effectively implement these clean production principles? This is something that we also had a look at. And we also thought, use as a context, a country, which in this case was India, so our study took place in there. So that was cleaner production. Also, another of the evolutions that we have actually pushed as the supply chain logistic managers, operation managers, is that we have moved from managing supply chains in a traditional way into managing with a more green view, if you like. Because of that reason, we have moved from the traditional supply chain management into what is called green supply chain management. And I mean, I will not be teaching you about green supply chain management. I believe that the audience, most of you will be expert in this area. And what is the difference between one and the other? I mean, the green supply chain management is exactly the same as the supply chain management, you know, the traditional one, but now injecting that green mentality and the green approach in all the activities that occur in a supply chain. I mean, if you look, for example, at logistics, you know, distribution of product from A to B, you know, trying to reduce CO2 emissions, trying to conserve fuel, trying to optimize packing, loading, etc., taking into consideration not only the economic aspect, but the green one as well. We know by research that both of them will be hand in hand. So if you improve all these aspects, you will improve efficiency and therefore your bottom line, and at the same time, you will be more environmentally friendly. But again, it's something that we have been able to do in our supply chains to address this particular challenge that we got. A little bit more of the work that me and my team have been doing. I mean, in this case, OR, as we call it here, or operation research more oriented, rather than OM, or operation management. So we developed a taxonomy to actually optimize green supply chain management, published in the International Journal of Production Economics. A little bit more of the work that my colleagues and I have been doing. So in this case, we look at lean principles, green practices, and process innovation practices, and develop a model for green supply chain performance. So how to measure green supply chain performance in the supply chains. Again, I will not be going deeper into any single one of these papers, because every single one of them could be a keynote speech on its own. So I'm just giving you a little bit of the idea of what me and my team are doing in these particular areas to address this challenge that we have. So we moved from supply chain management into green supply chain management. The same we did in logistics. I mean, from my point of view, logistics is one activity of managing a supply chain. And we have done exactly the same. So we have moved the traditional logistics into the green logistics or sustainable logistics. And this is a massive, massive area of opportunity, because transportation is becoming increasingly linked to environmental problems. Well, it's not becoming, I mean, it is linked, and it's actually the main area of opportunity that we have in our profession to tackle this particular problem that we have. I mean, unfortunately, the technology that we use is by nature going to be polluting. But what can we do as supply chain managers, logistic managers, to make our logistic operations more efficient? I mean, looking at more efficient packing, as it is mentioned in there, optimizing our routes, optimizing our load of trucking or freight, integrating our suppliers, etc., etc. So again, in terms of research and applied research, this is a massive, massive area of opportunity, something that we are doing a lot in the University of Derby, working with different logistic companies here in the United Kingdom to actually look for ways from a lot of different angles to address this environmental challenge. I mean, from the behavioral point of view, it could be from the engineering point of view, the optimization point of view, the psychological point of view as well, because many people would not accept some of the approaches that would change actually the practices to make them more efficient and more environmentally friendly. But well, it's another example, again, of how we have been changing the management of supply chains, and in this case, logistics, to address this problem. Reverse logistics, and then again, I'm not going to give you a lecture on reverse logistics. Probably some of you will know more than I do in terms of what reverse logistics are, etc., etc. Reverse logistics on its own, from my point of view, is not environmentally friendly, but is an enabler of environmental sustainability. I mean, the reverse logistics is a key element for circular economy, for example. And why is that? I mean, once that you get a product to a consumer, and that consumer use the product and it gets to its end of life, in many cases, the product will be disposed. And if it is disposed, well, it goes to the landfill, or some of its part could be rescued and recycled, etc., etc. But if you got a reverse logistic process, like many companies in the United Kingdom, actually that product can get back to the manufacturer, and the manufacturer will be doing something else with that product. Probably he could resell it as a second hand. If it doesn't work anymore, it would recycle it. If it is not able to be recycled, it could be scrapped, but it will be done or scrapped in a proper way, following government regulations, or it could be reconditioned, or it could be repaired, or it could be remanufactured. And the idea would be that you would be extending the life product of that particular product, and therefore disposing less of all that material that has to go somewhere. But again, reverse logistics is not environmentally friendly on its own. It's just a tool, an instrument that will help with environmental sustainability. This is a little bit of the work that I have done before in terms of reverse logistics as well, looking at some, multimodal using the evolutionary algorithms to actually optimize reverse logistics operations. This is another concept, and probably you have heard about it. I could see in the program some papers in Economía Circular, which I'm very, very happy to see in Mexico. So actually the concept of circular economy was proposed by some British economists, and it is basically telling you that we currently live in what is called a linear model. And what that means, that we extract natural resources, we manufacture something with the natural resources, we distribute the product that has been manufactured, we use the product and we dispose it, we throw it away. That's a linear model. And it tells you, the theory, that yes, this linear business model will work as long as natural resources are unlimited and cheap. We know that that is not the case. So we are actually living in a borrowed time if we continue using this particular business model. So this British economists developed the concept of circular economy, and the Helen MacArthur Foundation here in the United Kingdom has been one of the leaders in trying to promote this concept of circular economy. And the circular economy concept tells you that actually we need to keep products, we need to keep materials in the system as much as possible. So once that it gets to its end of life, we need to reinject it into the system, so it carry on being in the system rather than being disposed and pollute. Very simple example, this computer that I am using right now. So if it just breaks, probably, I don't know, my brother-in-law in the US would say, yeah, it's not working anymore, let me throw it away and buy a new one. Well, I mean, actually, yeah, that's an option, and something that unfortunately we have been doing. But what is going to happen with that computer that you are just throwing away? So something will happen with all the different components that it has. So circular economy will tell you, well, it's not working anymore. Can you maintain it and repair it? If it cannot be maintained or repaired because the failure is beyond being in use, well, can you reduce it and distribute it in a different way? Or can you actually refurbish it or remanufacture it and using it in a different way? If it cannot be done, well, at least we should be able to recycle the material. So this is the concept of circular economy, I mean, in very general terms. And we, supply chain managers and logistic managers and operation managers, had been actually adapting this concept of circular economy into the management of our supply chains. I mean, for example, we now got the concept of circular economy, of circular supply chains, where I have been doing quite a bit of work, also called closed loop supply chains. Very, very current topic. I mean, for those that want to do some research in that area, it's very, very current. And also not only at supply chain level, but at internal operations level, we have been using that concept in terms of circular production systems or circular manufacturing systems as well. So again, we have been taking all those concepts and adapting them into how we manage our supply chains, and that had made the management of our supply chains evolve. This is a very current topic, what I was telling you. I mean, this tells you that a lot of funding in the European Union and in the United Kingdom has been dedicated to actually do research in circular economy. So very, very fashionable. That's why I was telling you, I was very happy to see that some papers that will be presented in the conference are in circular economy. And yesterday I was doing some work in the computer and suddenly I received an email from what is called, and I got it in here, yeah, NCN Poland. And NCN Poland is actually the CONACYT of Mexico, but in this case, NCN is the institution in Poland that manage research. And they were actually inviting me to review a research proposal from an institution from Poland. And surprise, surprise, yes, it's in circular economy because a very, very fashionable area at the moment. In terms of academic research in circular economy, a lot of special issues in a lot of different top journals around the world. That one that you can see in the right-hand corner at the top, Journal of Manufacturing Technology Management is my own special issue. I had the opportunity of leading it, and so we got some very, very nice papers from all over the world. But a lot of emphasis put into that one. So for those young Mexican researchers in supply chains, again, closed-loop supply chains, circular supply chains is a very hot topic that you can do some research. I mean, talking to my colleagues in Mexico, Instituto Politécnico Nacional, Universidad de Monterrey, Universidad Autónoma de Aguascalientes, it gives me the impression that not a lot has been done in that particular area in Mexico, and that there is plenty of opportunity. Some other of the research that we have been doing and publishing, the one that is at the bottom, I'm very happy with that one, a circularity measurement toolkit for manufacturing SMEs, and I'm particularly happy because it's a research that was published in a top-ranked journal in the world, and it was done by my Mexican student when I was supervising her in Warwick University, Eileen. Now she's working for Coca-Cola in Mexico City, and we developed this toolkit that helps companies to understand how circular their internal and supply chain operations are. And we were actually able to prove that toolkit to a Delphi study, you know, talking to experts, etc., and we tested in a company in Mexico as well. Again, some of the work that me and my team have been doing in terms of circular economy, with the top one in the mining sector in particular, the bottom one is actually a research that I did with some of my colleagues from the Universidad Autónoma de Aguascalientes, particularly in the automotive industry. I mean, you know, Aguascalientes got a very, very strong automotive industry, got Nissan in there, which we had the opportunity of visiting when Gaston was there as well. So looking at how circular economy concepts can live, if you like, with the eco-innovation concept as well. More research on circular economy. So I can see in there my clock, I am like 12 minutes just away from you know, meeting my time, so I will be skipping some of this, but if some of you are interested in that research, I will be more than happy to discuss it with you. That was a circular economy. Now, another of the things that we have been doing as operation managers, supply chain managers, logistic managers, is that we actually have merged some traditional approaches like Lean or Manufactura Svelta, if you like. So Lean on its own look at the profitability, efficiency, customer satisfaction, quality, etc. But we had the need to look at the environmental side. So we have put the green and lean concepts together to actually address not only the economic side, but also the environmental side. And this in particular is an area where I have done plenty of research myself. I like a lot this area. This is a paper that was published in 2015 in the Journal of Cleaner Production. And actually, a couple of months ago, I had very good news that Stanford University in the US had done some research, and that research was positioning me as in the top 2% most cited scientists in the world in the fields of operation management and supply chain management. And in this case, this particular paper has helped me to get a lot of citations, a literature review. And in particular, I was looking at, you know, how companies and researchers had been looking at the combination of green and lean. This is a conceptual map, and actually every single number that you can see in there is a paper. So the more numbers that you can see in there, the more papers have been published in a specific area. I remember that I was in the Sri Lankan Kandy 3 years ago, and I was invited to do a keynote speech in a built environment conference. I mean, it's not my area, and I was a bit nervous. TV was there, and radio, and these people that I didn't know in an area that was not mine. And I was telling them actually, this conceptual map is telling me that the combination of green and lean has not been explored in the construction sector. You can see only a couple of papers, so you researchers of this environment have plenty of opportunity to research in that area. I mean, if we look, for example, at supply chain, you can see that there are quite a few papers published looking at the combination of green and lean, particularly in supply chains, but very little has been done in terms of logistics. So there might be some opportunity in there as well for the researchers to work in that particular area. The paper is about 6 years old, so a lot of things have happened in there. I have also been looking at the impact of lean methods on the manufacturing performance. So do companies that implement lean are more environmental friendly than companies that do not? That's a research question that we have tried to answer. And for example, what of the lean methods have a stronger impact on environmental sustainability? I mean, the traditional total productive maintenance or value stream mapping, automation, etc. Again, I will not be debating the research in this aspect, but it is something that we have been doing, also published in a top journal. This one in particular was an empirical research. This one was an empirical research that actually tried to address the same question as this, but following a different research methodology. This was a case study actually that we did with 5 companies in Italy as well to see what the impact of implementing lean principles on its environmental performance was. I mean, again, some other researchers related to lean and environmental sustainability. We will not be going in detail into those ones. At some point, and this is another paper that has got quite a few citations, theoretical paper, not even empirical research. So one morning I woke up and I was thinking, okay, Jose, we got lean, we got Lean Six Sigma, we got green lean. What about green Lean Six Sigma? And I start thinking, like, okay, so what could be the limitations of one and the other when applied, independently? What could be the limitations when applied, together, etc. And at some point, so I just came to the conclusion in a theoretical base that actually, if we integrate Lean, Green, and Six Sigma principle, we will have more advantages rather than Lean on its own, or the Green, or the Lean Six Sigma on its own. A lot of debate in there, and I'm open to that as well. A lot of criticisms of a matter of putting together concepts and practical challenge, and that's absolutely fine. But this is from a conceptual point of view. We have also moved from the traditional value stream mapping to what is called environmental value stream mapping. With the value stream mapping, as you know, is a very common, very simple lean tool. And it has been modified by operation managers and at a supply chain level and logistics. I will show it to you, to actually not only looking at the waste related to efficiency, but also waste in terms of CO2 emission, also water conservation, also electricity consumption, etc. So again, you can see that our profession has been trying to do something with what we already have to address this particular challenge that we have. This is a research that I had the opportunity of doing with some colleagues in South America, in Peru. So we developed this tool called environmental value stream mapping, and we provide an approach to implement it, because you can have the tool. It doesn't mean that you are going to be using correctly. So in this case, that's what we have tried to achieve, and we did that by looking at the PDCA Deming cycle to try to address this particular issue with the implementation of that tool. It's another research that I was able to do with some colleagues from the US and from Morocco to try to help them implement green and lean concurrently at the same time. This research is very similar to that one, but seen from a different point of view, looking at Gemba Kaizen of lean as an approach to actually implement green and lean at the same time, and again, gaining the benefit of not only being efficient, but also being environmentally friendly. And
I mean, this is a particular research that I had the opportunity of conducting with some of my colleagues from the Universidad de Monterrey, and in particular, my very good friend, Bernardo Villarreal, Professor Bernardo Villarreal, I mean, also very good friend of Gaston. Actually, I know Gaston through Bernardo. So in this particular research, we were working with DHL in Monterrey, and we developed this methodology that you can see in there, these different steps, and we actually developed this environmental sustainable transportation value stream mapping that was implemented by the DHL in Monterrey, and we were able to actually help the company to massively reduce CO2 emission, and also we helped them to save a lot of fuel as well, which by definition would be also environmentally friendly. A lot of work I have been doing with Bernardo in terms of lean logistics. Several papers have been published in that particular area. I mean, just to close up the presentation, I got exactly 4 minutes out of the 45, so I'm kind of doing well, I would say. So some conclusions to finish this. So environmental degradation is arguably the most critical challenge. I don't think, as I was mentioning, anybody would argue against that unless, you know, we talk to Donald Trump or something like that one. So it's a very, very critical challenge. And this challenge that we have has come because of our industrial activity and technological development. So industrial activity is positive, technological development is also positive. I mean, we were able to find the vaccine for COVID in, you know, 10 months or so because of all the technology that has been developed, something that probably 20 years ago wouldn't have been possible. But yeah, we have to be careful in terms of balancing the environmental element and technological development and industrial activity. So we got a big problem. We know where that problem is coming from. Have we tried to do something? As I mentioned it, I would say yes, we have developed all these concepts of sustainability, corporate social responsibility, green economy, circular economy, low carbon economy, and you name it. So it's like a fair of different approaches in there. And we as supply chain managers and logistic professionals and managers, I would say, and researchers as well, and consultants, industrialists, yes, we have tried to do something. And I believe it's part of the, you know, evidence that hopefully I have provided. Is it enough? What we have done, from my point of view, it is not enough, and probably very, very little people would argue against that. I was telling you, in the United Kingdom, we were reducing our CO2 emission, and suddenly a year and a half ago, 2 years, it started increasing again because of some changes in government policy. So it's a problem that is constant there. So we need to design more eco-friendly products, production and transportation systems, and make sure that these are run as effectively and efficiently as possible. So that's something that we have to do, again, as the supply chain manager, logistic manager, operation manager, is something that we can do. But actually, we need to go beyond the technical elements of our profession. I mean, just even forget about the processes and the optimizations and this and that one. But we have to make sure that our behavior and actions also contribute to changing our societies, culture, and government policies. I mean, we got the Instituto Mexicano del Transporte. I mean, we got the knowledge, we got the expertise to actually influence policy making, particularly in Mexico, to actually make them see that actioning in that is absolutely necessary. So that's something that our profession and our institute, our associations, etc., have to be doing. And as it is mentioned at the bottom of the slide, we all got powerful reasons to do that. And a lot of people come and say, Jose, why do you pay a lot of attention to this environmental element and a lot of different papers and funding applications and research projects, and why everything around you know, the environmental sustainability aspect? And I always tell that people, well, that's actually my main reason. So I got my 2 little kids, Aiden, he's 7, Alan, he's 4. So if at some point this issue of environmental sustainability does not affect me, it might affect them, you know, in their lifetime. If that is not the case, it might probably affect my granddaughters or my grandson. And if that is not the case, at some point in the future, our future generations will suffer from that particular problem. So it's something that we have to act now. And well, this is my main motivation for me to do all this work in this particular area, which, by the way, I enjoyed a lot. So thank you very much for listening. So I hope that you enjoyed the presentation, found it interesting. And at some point, again, I would be more than keen to contribute, to work with any of you if you are interested. So these are some of my information. If you type my name in Google, you will find plenty of things in there as well, including my email address and everything. So thank you very much for your attention.
Estimado José, pues muchísimas gracias por tu presentación. La verdad es que ha sido un gusto poder estar escuchándote y sobre todo nos has transmitido mucha energía y pues la verdad información muy interesante. Mira, realmente tenemos unos minutos, por ahí tenemos algunas preguntas que me han hecho llegar por WhatsApp y quisiéramos aprovecharte, estimado José. Mira, una de las preguntas que nos hacen es, ¿qué le recomendarías tú a estudiantes que en la actualidad se están formando en cadena de suministro para irse preparando hacia estos retos medioambientales? Es decir, de manera concreta, más allá de a lo mejor tomar alguna clase específica, etcétera, digamos, si tú pudieras decirles, mira, tal vez tienes que especializarte en esta herramienta o tienes que conocer este software o acércate a este tipo de especialistas, etcétera, algo, digamos, que sea una acción concreta que ellos pudieran tomar para ir encaminándose hacia, pues, tener la posibilidad de después responder a estos retos que se están, pues, ya presentando constantemente en nuestra vida.
Sí, gracias, Gastón. Bueno, yo les recomendaría a los estudiantes en esta área, bueno, que se acerquen a las instituciones como el Instituto Mexicano del Transporte. Obviamente tienen el conocimiento, tienen el expertise también, saben cuáles son los problemas que México está teniendo, bueno, no solo México, sino el mundo en términos de cadenas de suministro y transporte. Y obviamente aprender de los expertos en ese sentido. Hacer investigación en términos de leer simplemente, ver reportes, news, simplemente envolverse en el mundo de cadenas de suministro y logística. En este caso, yo también enfatizaría la importancia que las universidades y los sistemas de enseñanza tienen, el poder las instituciones que adopten este tipo de temas. No sé en México qué tan desarrollado esté ese sentido. Aquí en el Reino Unido, supply chain is a buzzword at the moment. Estamos teniendo problemas en cadenas de suministro por razones diferentes y lo estamos viendo ahora en términos de reclutar estudiantes en nuestras carreras. Hemos tenido números muy altos de estudiantes que quieren aprender acerca de cadenas de suministro en términos de logística. Y bueno, no solo los estudiantes, sino también las instituciones educativas en México, ¿no? Darle la importancia a este tópico que tiene.
Claro, claro, no, pues muchas gracias. Y por el otro lado, ¿qué podríamos recomendar, por ejemplo, a autoridades, ¿no? Que están pensando en cómo mejorar, digamos, las operaciones para tener, pues, una huella de carbono más baja. Actualmente nos están siguiendo en este momento autoridades de Gobierno de México y directivos de algunas grandes empresas. Entonces, creo que podría ser muy interesante pasarles pues alguna acción, alguna idea que pudieran comenzar a implementar o a explorar para pues mejorar estas operaciones y empezar a caminar hacia una operación más verde.
Yo creo que lo que podrían hacer las compañías privadas pues es acercarse a los expertos, ¿no? Si es que no tienen el expertise dentro de la compañía. Otra vez el Instituto Mexicano del Transporte probablemente tenga ese expertise. Aquí en el Reino Unido hay programas muy fuertes del gobierno a través de instituciones educativas, a través de centros de investigación, en donde ellos proveen fondos para que los centros de investigación, para que las instituciones educativas apoyen a las organizaciones en términos de ser más environmentally friendly. Al principio de mi presentación estaba presentando un proyecto de 4 millones de pounds que son financiados por la Unión Europea, y la idea de ese proyecto en particular es darle el dinero a la universidad y que con el expertise de la universidad le ayude a las compañías, especialmente pequeñas aquí en nuestra área, a reducir emisiones de carbón. Entonces, en este caso, otra vez las compañías en México, me imagino que van a tener algunas instituciones a las que se pueden acercar y buscar este expertise para que puedan mejorar sus operaciones en ese sentido.
Claro, José. Sí, nos queda claro que el conocimiento es muy importante y de alguna manera acercarse para compartirlo y sobre todo irlo creando. Y además, yo creo que lo que tú nos ofreces también es muy interesante, hacer esas colaboraciones. Ya mencionabas tú todo el trabajo que has estado haciendo a nivel internacional y con algunos buenos amigos aquí en México. Entonces, bueno, pues con eso terminaríamos, estimado José. Digo, no sé si quieras agregar algo más. Para nosotros ha sido un honor que estés con nosotros. Me da muchísimo gusto volverte a ver, digo, aunque sea por estos medios, pero seguramente que en algún momento tendremos oportunidad de vernos personalmente y pues continuar la conversación.
Claro que sí, Gastón, no nada más para agradecerte nuevamente a ti la invitación, al Instituto Mexicano del Transporte y al comité organizador de Silón por la oportunidad. El honor es mío, créeme, lo que me da bastante gusto poder hablar con mis paisanos, y no nada más con los hindúes o con la gente de otros países, que lo hago muy frecuentemente. Entonces te lo agradezco mucho, 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 y sí, espero que estemos en contacto y que nos podamos ver pronto, ya sea aquí en México o en algún otro lugar.
Claro que sí, José. Te mando un abrazo, por favor, cuídate mucho y nuevamente estamos muy agradecidos de haberte tenido con nosotros. Seguramente que pronto tendremos algo que hacer, alguna colaboración o algún otro contacto. Entonces, te mando un
Definitivamente,
abrazo.
Gastón. Igualmente, Gastón, lo aprecio mucho. Nos vemos pronto.
Hasta luego.
Saludos, gracias.
Pues muy bien, estimados amigos, pues vamos a continuar con el programa. Como ustedes saben, a continuación tenemos un panel de análisis, un panel de expertos donde se va a discutir, se va a conversar sobre este tema de regionalización de las cadenas de suministro. Este panel, como ustedes lo pueden ver en el programa, tiene, digamos que como título, el mismo leitmotiv de este congreso, que es de America's Insight. ¿Por qué por qué este título? Bueno, todos hemos escuchado de esta competencia comercial que existe entre pues, dos gigantes económicos, que es Estados Unidos y China, y que recientemente, justamente derivado de todo esto, pues ha habido una tendencia interesante por parte de las empresas para reubicar instalaciones o simplemente duplicar esas instalaciones, tener alguna instalación en China, pero también otra en Norteamérica, de tal manera que puedan surtir a estos dos grandes mercados. Pero en esta reorganización industrial también es importante resaltar que América Latina en general tiene una gran oportunidad para volverse parte de estas cadenas de suministro. En ese sentido, consideramos que efectivamente en México vamos a tener una buena posibilidad para integrar más empresas pequeñas y medianas a estas cadenas de suministro y al mismo tiempo conectarnos con empresas en América Latina. Es por eso que en este siguiente panel hemos invitado y agradecemos mucho que hayan aceptado esta invitación personalidades de muy alto perfil, que sobre todo son personalidades de la industria que han, digamos, observado este fenómeno desde diferentes ángulos, puesto que algunas de ellas son pertenecen al sector automotriz, pero otras están, por ejemplo, en el sector de juguete y alguna de ellas, por ejemplo, está en el sector de la consultoría. Entonces, desde estas diferentes perspectivas queremos analizar cuáles son estas oportunidades para regionalizar cadenas de suministro y en dónde podríamos integrarnos, digamos, las empresas mexicanas, cómo los académicos, la investigación podría participar para mejorar, para hacer más competitivas estas cadenas de suministro. Es sabido que el conocimiento se puede crear, se puede propagar a través de esta colaboración. Entonces, es un hecho que va a ser muy importante que las instituciones académicas no solamente fortalezcan sus enlaces entre ellas, sino que también haya un fortalecimiento con otras instituciones a nivel internacional. Y eso es parte de lo que el Congreso Internacional de Logística y Cadena de Suministro pretende ofrecer, ¿no? Ofrecer la posibilidad de estar en contacto con estas personalidades como el profesor José Arturo Garza-Reyes, que ustedes acaban de presenciar en su presentación, muy atinada y de manera muy específica, pues muy aplicable al contexto actual.